let's start our session today. Let me put my timer here so I keep track of where we are. And first of all, a quick introduction so you know who I am. Maybe you met me before, maybe not. I'm Flavio. I am the founder at Highbridge Academy, right? I started out life in Brazil and I studied business and I have a master's in management. I was fortunate enough to be able to study in different countries, such as Switzerland, France, Australia, Spain, and now I live in Berlin, as already mentioned, in Germany. In terms of my work experience, well, I started with small businesses when I was in college. I played around a little bit being a young founder. Then I went to consulting to get the experience, to get the brand, the analytical skills, the network from consulting. And I also love the idea of traveling for work, right? Maybe some of you can relate. Then I went to Arthur D. Little, which is a boutique. No, boutique, it's an international consulting firm, I would say, but a small one. And by the way, the first one in the world from 1886. And then I joined, after my master's, I joined McKinsey, but not before failing a couple of times my MBB interviews, right? Definitely, it's very, very hard to get in the first time you try, but if you persist, right, a lot of people can do it. So I spent about 5 years in consulting total. McKinsey said, hey, Flavio, you can go on and do an MBA if you wish. We pay the bill. I'm like, wow, that's very generous. Like that's $120,000. I applied to some schools, went through this process, but in the end, I was thinking about it very hard. Like, do I want to come back to consulting after the MBA? Because you should, right? So if you get this sponsorship, you go back for at least 2 years. At least it was the deal at the time at McKinsey. And I thought, maybe I just want to be a founder, really, right? So I moved on to learn more founders things in SumUp, right? So it's a fintech in payments, and I started out in Sao Paulo. Then I moved myself, transferred myself to Berlin, the headquarters, and then since then I'm here. So that's how life brought me here. I left the job after a year. In SumUp, it was a bit slow, boring. I was not really going anywhere. So I decided to start a new company and I started Highbridge, right? So Highbridge is a fully remote company. We have a global team. That's what I've been doing the last 4 or 5 years. And in terms of my personal side, I love being in water. Finally, the weather is feasible for that. I love being active, going to the gym and playing games and learning about psychology, right? This is me. I always say be intentional and intense about your own development because that's what it takes, right? Nobody's gonna look after that for you. Just a quick intro about who we are as a company, Highbridge. In numbers, we are a team of ex-MBB faculty, right? Here's a snapshot of some of us, like a third of our faculty, right? We are quite spread across the world. One thing in common is that everybody has been in McKinsey, Bain, BCG, so top consulting firms. If I add up, I think I would say 300 years of project experience, right? With top management and top government, like really like the cutting edge topics that we don't even hear about because it's confidential, right? We cannot know what they are working on, but you can be sure that they are right now, not now because it's Sunday, but this week, making really, really top-notch recommendations to people who define what the course of the world is going to be. More numbers. We graduated over 1,000 students and we have a placement rate of 60%, which is quite an increase compared to the base rate of 1 to 3% acceptance that the firms publish, right? When they say how many people get in, that's 1 to 3% of the applications. But those are, of course, among the people who take our course, take our material and really consume it. They are engaged, right? I always say, believe it or not, just enrolling in a consulting course doesn't really change the odds of you getting in anyway. And in terms of results, we have quite a lot to show, right? So as I said, big placement rate, we hear news every week of people getting jobs. Last year was very tough, right? If you applied last year or this year and you didn't get positive answers and an opportunity to interview, you're not alone, right? The firms were really like downsizing because they had overhired during the pandemic, and now it's kind of getting stable again. We see some movements, and here's a great window for you to start practicing to interview for companies, right? So the market is coming back to normal. And in terms of results, I also am very proud to show our Trustpilot rating. We have 4.9. That's very difficult to achieve, guys, girls. Like if you see Trustpilot from other companies, like in the reviews people leave, like, yeah. So we really make sure that everybody's happy, and we make sure that we are the best that in class to offer this. And we are also the most comprehensive, right? We have 400 hours of consulting career content, all created by ex-MBB consultants. So I can confidently say that this is a very comprehensive journey. This is a slide I show during graduation. You have all the workshops of module 1, then you graduate, then you have all the workshops of module 2, which is, so the module 1 is interview skills, module 2 is work skills, module 3 is leadership skills, right? So it's a journey. You don't do it at once. It takes 2-3 years to finish hybrid. You come and go when you have a new need. And that's how we set it up, right? Because it's a challenging career. It's not only about getting the job. It's about succeeding, right? So that's us. Now, what do we use at Highbridge? The 7 skills methodology, okay? Because there are a lot of resources out there. You can download casebooks and PDFs endlessly, right, online. But we took a very good look at it, and we don't agree with a lot of the things that are there. It's often shallow. It's not really updated, right? Once it's published, these PDFs, these video courses that you can buy, it's kind of there, static forever. And we don't like that. In Highbridge, our content is alive, right? We repeat and we redeliver, we upgrade the content every single time we deliver it to adjust to the market reality, to what interviewers want, and so on, okay? So, and we organize it around the 7 skills methodology so that you can practice each one to achieve mastery. And today, that's what the day is about, right? We're going to do it together, practicing a case and mastering each of the skills, right? So probably a bit of different way for you to study, but you will see how powerful it can be. Buckle up. It's a lot to cover. I have to be mindful of time, right? And by the way, we will need volunteers. So if you are consulting material and you have like what it takes, you're probably going to volunteer today. I feel it, okay? Raise your hand, raise your Zoom hand, and I call your name. You give it a shot. This is a safe environment. Nobody is evaluating you or giving you a rating or anything like that. It's an opportunity for you to practice, okay? And I always say, if you don't have the courage to speak up and to communicate and to try things and to make mistakes and to grow, maybe consulting is going to be too much of a stretch for you, right? So to be real, right? I don't tell everybody, you should come to consulting, come to Highbridge and so on. Maybe it's too far off your comfort zone and you don't want to do this profession, right? But if you feel like, I like to learn, grow, I'm not afraid, and I want to test it out, and I want to I'm fine with making mistakes, then this is like, go for it. If you have questions, please send them in the chat. I'll be happy to take them in specific moments, right? I'll fish them out and help you clarifying anything. Good. Let's take a deep breath. And let's start. I will give you the case briefing, so you better have somewhere to take notes. If you are walking on your phone and so on, maybe you're not in a position to do that. But if you're sitting down, if you're on your computer, if you have paper, or you can open a document, I recommend you to do this case, not watch it, because like it's like watching someone solve math, right? You don't learn anything when you watch people solving math. It's the same thing for cases. You only learn, your brain only connects things that you can retrieve later on in the interview if you actually start using it. Let's go. Ready? So this is a McKinsey case, by the way, right, from the McKinsey library. So it's very realistic of what people get in interviews. So your client is ImageMed, a medical imaging company. They have 2 businesses. First, the analog imaging business, and second, the digital imaging business. In analog, you can think of traditional, like technologies such as X-ray. And this is 90% of the revenue for ImageMed. For digital, well, this is this new generation of technology. Now it's a bit old, but back then it was new, which is mainly about the magnetic resonance imaging, or MRI. It's currently 10% of ImageMed's revenue and is growing fast. A direct sales force is used to market and sell to hospitals and clinics, and they operate in the major European markets. The problem is that ImageMed has seen its profitability in the analog business steadily decline over the past 10 years. And they have retained Highbridge to investigate the causes of this decline and suggest strategies to help maximize profitability in the near term, okay? So this is the speed that the interviewer will give you the case. It will not make it easy for you to stop and write everything down, but it's a practice session. Who wants to recap the case for me? I just need a volunteer. Just repeat what I told you. Very good. I have some volunteers. I love it. Sangeet, please go ahead.
Okay, so I hope you can hear me.
Yes, we can.
So our client is ImageMed, who have two lines of businesses, analog and digital, basically functioning in mainstream EU market. Right now, we've seen their profitability in the analog business declining in the past 10 years, and we've been basically hired to investigate and to rectify this profitability for the near term.
Very good. Thank you, Sangeet, for the recap. Did you get any numbers from the recap, from the prompt?
Yeah, I did. I mean, I wasn't sure if I was supposed to repeat it, so sorry. But for the analog imaging, you know that it's 90% of revenue. Digital imaging is 10% of the revenue, and it's also fast growing. And yeah.
Very good. You got it. Good. Thank you so much, Sangeet. Great job. First of all, volunteering, being the first. Nobody can take this from you. Excellent. Right. That's it. Right. Consulting is about jumping in opportunities. Very good, Sangeet. Thank you for recapping. It was very clear. You looked and sounded very confident, and that's an important first impression that you have to make. And you have to repeat the information that you got, right, accurately. I think you did that. I do recommend you to repeat the numbers because they might they might be important, and you might have somehow misunderstood something. So it's very good to capture and play back the numbers. Okay. Now, let me show you the best practices of this part, listening and recap. That's the first of the 7 skills that we're going to deep dive into. And Sangeet, this is to make it even better, right? Because in the end of the day, it is competitive. There are lots of candidates. Your interviewer gets so many interviews, right, to make. And if you don't stand out since the beginning, then the interviewer will be neutral about you. If you stand out from the beginning, normal interviewers want you to succeed more than the average candidate, and they will help you more as well. So it's kind of, they're going to enforce that and make you more confident even. So I can't understate the importance of a great opening. Well, let's do it. The first one is listen actively. Okay, very important. Process the information as you receive it. Don't let the note-taking stop you from listening. Okay, some people just write things down without paying attention, and then they later on look at their notes and try to reconstruct whatever it was. If you have this tendency, try practicing not taking any notes, maximum numbers, right? And pay attention because you have to understand as you listen. Second, take only a few notes because, as I said, we're not going to make it easy for you and speak very slowly, right? You have to have your own method of using abbreviations, of focusing on keywords and numbers so that you're fast. Call your interviewer by name and thank them because in the end, it's about it's a professional service, right? They're trying to extrapolate how you are behaving now to how you'll behave in front of a client. And if you are like smiley, confident, saying my name, thanking me for the information, don't overdo it, okay? But in the right measure, then you're showing that you're cordial and you're going to be cordial with clients too. Show genuine and interest. And here it's a very clear differentiation, right, between the candidates who just jump in and rip just recap and play back exactly what they heard, right straight in. And candidates who take the time to make one remark, appreciate the problem, say something interesting about the case, right? Before they start. For instance, you can say, it's been a long time since I last had an X-ray, right? It's old but very cool technology. MRI even cooler. That's it, right? Or you can say something like, you can say like, oh, I just read on the news that AI is helping doctors like diagnose diseases and MRI results much faster, right? Say something that shows that you are listening to the news or reading the news, if you're thinking, or if you have a personal experience about it. Or maybe you can crack a small joke, right? You can say like, oh, let's do an X-ray on the client's business and see what treatment we can propose. So it's short, it's not a story, okay? And it's specific. It's not something like, oh, how interesting this case is. Like, don't say that. Because like, it's clear that you just say that to any case you face, okay? Also, very small, but very important point is never say that, oh, I already worked in this industry before, or I have experience in this type of project. You're shooting yourself in the foot, right? Because if you have experience, you should be already above average. So don't do that. Don't necessarily call out. If it's on your CV, that's fine, but don't call out in this beginning. I see a lot of candidates doing that. It's a mistake. You're raising the bar for yourself. Then present the action plan, announce your intentions beforehand. So you can say like, oh, thank you, Flavio. I'm going to recap the case, and then I have some questions to clarify a bit more of the information, if you don't mind. Okay, so it's telling in advance what you're about to do, signaling, right? But being patient and like just jump in, right? We don't like candidates who take too long and they take their time to recap the like every single word that we say, because in the end of the day, time is limited. You want to show that you want to get to the meat of the case, right? And have time and enough time to finish the case. So that's what you should be looking for, right? Sit at the edge of your seat and like lean in instead of lean back, and then go with pace and with energy so that you don't lose momentum. Very important, the energy level. One more. This is very optional, right? But some people like can benefit from that because it organizes a very long prompt into 3 distinct parts: the situation or the context, so our client, the industry, etc., the complication, what is wrong and why are they calling us, and the question in the end of the prompt, right? It organizes. You can even use these words. The situation is, the complication is, the questions, because consultants use that a lot. They like it. If you missed any information, complete it or ask it as you go, right? And don't wait until the end of the recap to say like, oh, by the way, what was the number? No, like naturally, like, oh, you said the revenues were how many percent? 90. Oh, okay, got it, right? It's fine to miss a couple things here and there. It's not fine to miss 30, 40% or more of the prompt, okay? If you ask your interviewer to repeat too many things and essentially he's giving or she's giving you the prompt twice, then probably you are not taking notes properly. And it's a skill to listen and take notes fast, because you're going to need it at work as well, right? It's unfortunately, AI is not going to be everywhere. Clients are not going to let you record them saying things. Oh, the AI is going to record everything and give me the notes. No, note taking is still important. And in the end, cherry on the cake, ask if you are correct, right? Did I get everything right? Did I miss anything? Because that's the reason why you're doing your recap, right? So confirm it. So folks, recap is a habit. It's not a thing that you do in the beginning of the case and case closed and end of story. Every time you get a new question, every time you get new information, please recap it, because you want to play safe. You want to ensure that you understood. It's so common. I misunderstood the question in my McKinsey interview, and I created a completely different structure from what the interviewer was interested in. Luckily, she gave me another chance. She said, like, oh, no, you thought it's the wrong direction. Think about this. And then she gave me another 2 minutes, very kind, but don't expect it to happen, right? Normally, the interviewer is just going to reject you because you're not listening properly. And recapping decreases the risk, because if you recap something weird, the interviewer is going to correct you before it's too late. Okay, recap is a habit. Very good. Someone asking if I'll share the slides, not the slides, but I believe the recording will be available. Okay. Very good. Now let's move on to the second part, second skill, clarifying. Please share in the chat, everybody, any questions that you would ask your interviewer after this recap. Okay. I want to see, what are you thinking? What do you want to clarify? And I will tell you what I think about the questions. Please type up in the chat. What does success look like for the client? That's a good question. I'll ask the competitors and the market share of such devices. That's too early. That's over asking. I wouldn't ask this yet. Have competitors in the analog market been experiencing the same decline? That's a good question. Yes, I'll tell you why later. What is the cost structure of analog medical images? Too much detail, over asking. That's something that you have to guess in your structure later. Do we have information that the client's competitors are also experienced? Okay, similar to the previous one. That's good question about the industry. What percentage do you want to improve profitability? And we think, okay, goal question, very good. Is there a timeline for the client to achieve their goal? Good question. Who are your main competitors and how do they handle similar issues? Not a good question, over asking. I'll explain why. Do they know the reason for the reduction in revenue? That's your job. This always comes up. Never ask something that is already a question that has been posed to you. Okay? So you are hired as a consultant to diagnose the problem. So you cannot ask them, has there been any changes on how the company operates with same thing, right? You're trying to get the answer. Don't do that. You are hired. They're going to just say, like, it's your job. Can you provide a brief overview of the company's histories and products and services? No, this is not a good question. I already gave you enough information. If you go there, your interviewer will think you are boiling the ocean, right? You're doing something extremely difficult and over the top. Expansion plans? No, not a good question. Over asking. Have the prices of analog suppliers of medical med increased, caused image? Over asking. Okay, so you might be asking, like, Flavio, what the heck? Why is some questions good, some questions bad? I will explain to you. Okay, first you need to understand what are clarification questions for and what are they not for. So clarification questions, they cast more light onto the problem, but careful, don't overstep the limit and start making what we call data requests or testing specific hypotheses, or even trying to fish for the answer, right? Trying to get to the answer from the interviewer. So you can ask 3 to 7 questions in most cases, right? That's more or less the, like, 80% of the time, that's what you're gonna be having to ask, okay? And there are 5 categories that you should pay attention to now. So if you haven't paid attention to yet, that's very important that you tune in. And these are the most useful types of clarification questions. If you stick to them, don't be creative, right? Don't be creative trying to, like, oh, I got a great idea for a new question, which doesn't fit the 5 categories. I would say 99% of the time, you are making a mistake. You're over asking, right? And you should keep that question for later. First category, definitions. If you don't understand what a word exactly means, then ask it. What do you mean by MRI? I didn't understand that exactly, right? Something, right? What do you mean by best idea? What is best, right? How do you define it? So you can ask for definitions, and that's absolutely fine. You're casting more light into the problem because you cannot proceed without understanding every word properly, right? But you have to use your experience to assume, like, some meanings. You cannot ask 30 definitions questions, like every single word I said, okay? You have to choose. Second category, what exactly happened? Here, it's not, it's a narrow area. Like it's not any question. Like you have to stick to what numbers have changed, right? Can you please quantify and provide the time frame of X? But X is the main variable, like profit decline. Okay, how much has profit declined and in how long? Okay, that's fine, because you're just trying to get an idea of the order of magnitude of the main complaint, if it's revenue or profits or cost or something else. But don't start breaking this number down and asking, what are the costs? Like instead of profit, can you give me the costs and the volume and the price and so on? Because these are structuring questions. It's too early to ask that. 3, goal. Some of you asked that. What is the metric? What is the target? What is the time frame for the client? What is success? Like, what are they trying to achieve? What good looks like? So you always, as a consultant, you want to be goal-oriented and have a number to pursue. Otherwise, people will not agree if the project is over or not. And that's a huge problem for you as a consultant, right? So you have to land that number on paper as soon as possible. Business model. Nobody asked me that, but it's really important. You need to understand, what does the client do exactly, right? So because I said MRI, X-ray, do they sell the machines? Do they rent the machines? Do they design the machines and someone else builds it? Do they sell consumables, materials for the machine? Like, you need to understand what is the client really doing, right? And what are the main revenue streams? I gave you 90%, 10%, so you kind of know what is the main one. And the other one is growing fast, so I gave you information. But sometimes you want to understand better, like, what are all the important revenue streams that I need to be aware of? Okay, it's really the lifeblood of business. And finally, industry. Some of you asked that, like, how is the industry or economy doing? For instance, are we in a pandemic? Is this case during 2020, 2021, and so on? Okay, to understand if it's a systemic case or problem, everybody is in the same, having the same issue or not, or your client is specifically having this issue, because this can influence, in the end of the day, if this information will influence your structuring, which is the next step, but without overstepping the limit, without making data requests that you will need to actually solve the case. Right? In summary, understand definitions, understand what exactly happened, so order of magnitude of things, goal, where are we going, business model, so important, right? College doesn't really, even business majors, they come to us and they don't ask the right questions for business model. They don't have the understanding of like what really matters in business. That's why in Highbridge, we spend lots of time looking at different examples and building that business sense that you need to understand how the world works and the industry, okay? But please only ask relevant questions. Don't ask just because it looks good. This question sounds good. I saw it before in another case. Like, don't do that. You really need to ask and request information that you really need, that you want, right? Deliberately, intentionally. Ask confirmatory questions whenever possible. Never ask, like, what is the client's business model? Because you're putting on your interviewer's shoulders the whole work, right, of explaining it to, like, explain how you understand it and ask, is this correct? So, so they build the machines in a factory and they sell the machines to the hospitals. Is that correct? And then I can correct you if not, but don't be lazy, okay? Even the goal, you can already, like, I imagine the goal is to increase profits by some amount. What is that amount? Is that correct? Okay, much better. And ask follow-up questions when something is not fully clear. Don't pretend you understood anything in a case interview. It will come back to you. Don't pretend, oh, maybe can get away with it. No, it will never work. So you have to have a clarity of what has been said. And if the answer is not clear, you ask, like, sorry, I didn't get it yet. What do you mean by that? Okay. Very important principles. Those are work principles. This is what you're supposed to do when you are in a big consulting consulting company, doing really critical work for customers. Like, if you don't like do those things at work, you will fail. And that's why I cannot hire you. because you're not ready yet, right? The case interview process is not like pretending you can solve a case. It's really having the work skills and showing the work skills that you have. Okay, so to summarize, where are we? We started with the problem statement, was a mess, like where do we go? Then you recap the information just to confirm the data. Then we shed some light into this problem with the 5 categories of clarification questions. That's the time where you ask for 2 minutes to think, and then you structure during these 2 minutes. You break the issue down into its components, and only then you start making data requests. Like, what about this component, that component? We have data, this, and so on, okay? But this you do mostly if you are doing candidate-led case, right? For instance, at BCG, they really like you to request the data. The interviewer-led case type, where the interviewer is driving it, more McKinsey style, that's not necessary, right? You can proceed to the next phase without making data requests. They only want to see how you break things down. Okay, small differences, but we, in the bootcamp, we go through each one of them and so on. So what questions would you ask, Flavio? Well, I would ask the definition of profitability. What do you mean by profitability is down? Because if you know a thing or two about finance, you know that there are lots of things we can call profits: gross profit, net profit, profit, absolute profit, profitability, relative profitability, profit margin, percentage profit, and so on. So here I mean the absolute net profit. So the amount of dollars, euros, whatever currency, the end is going down. That's what I mean by the profitability going down. Okay, clear. But Flavio, let me understand what exactly happened here, right? How much did the profits drop? Well, you will receive this data later. We don't have it now. Okay. And our goal, what is it? And I assume it's increase the profits, right? The absolute net profits. Is that correct? Yes, that's correct. They want to restore it to the previous levels. Okay, and I'll receive data later. Yes, good. Just to understand the business model a bit better, what do they do exactly? Do they sell the machines and the materials, or something different? Well, yes, they sell both. You're correct. Especially the analog business, that's the one that has consumables, because you need the X-ray materials. The digital MRI is pure technology. You don't have any materials. And 5, do you have information whether competitors or the economy is suffering from a recession or some industry-wide issue, like a pandemic? And I can say, no, we don't have a pandemic, and actually we don't know much about competitors at this point. Okay, thank you so much. Those were my questions. So as you see here, I had 5, but not necessarily. You will always have 1 per category. And sometimes the question is already answered in the prompt. Like the objective, the goal might be already in the prompt, so you don't need to ask it again. Okay, so critical thinking. All right, let me stop for a moment. Sorry, there was a lot, but tell me if you have any questions, please. You can raise your hand as well. I'm more than happy to take verbal questions too. Or you type it. Or is everything clear? Reina, please go ahead.
Yeah, I have a question. So in this case, the company works both with analog and digital, right?
Correct.
How do you know which category to ask about, or what if it's important to actually ask about the digital business?
But what are you thinking about? What question is in your mind?
Like, for example, if you're saying analog is making 90% of their has been making 90% of their revenue, what if it's a dying market? Like, what if they should be focusing more on digital from now on? Like, are we supposed to bring in this thought process in the questions first?
Interesting point. I would say no, that's too early. You just need to understand the problem. All these elements, Reina, you will put in your structure, right? If you believe analog is dying, you're going to put like market trends and so on. We need to see, like, approach things with hypothesis. You cannot be certain. You cannot say like market is dying for X-ray. Maybe not at the time of this case, maybe not in the countries that we're talking about. So you have to approach everything as hypothesis that you put in your tree, in your structure, to test later.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. So it's really simpler than you think. Like clarification questions is really those 5 categories. They shed light onto the problem, and don't try to come up with hypotheses. So I believe that this is happening. Is it happening? This is testing hypothesis, right? Or what has changed? This is fishing for answer. Or can you give me the detailed profit numbers or break down all the competitors and their market share for me? Data request, right? Because if you start asking those things, it's almost impossible that you'll be structured about it. You will ask one thing, you will forget the other one, right? And this is not how consultants solve problems. This is how clients intuitively try to solve problems. But as a consultant, you put on a paper all possibilities logically, right? You break things down, and then you ask methodically. And that's the difference between intuitive problem solving and structured problem solving. Okay, so that's why you should not ask a ton of things. Pooja, please.
Yeah, hi. I just have a question as you have mentioned, like 2 minutes time duration for asking questions and clarifying. So what if you
Not
have
really
like,
that. Let me just correct. You don't have 2 minutes
okay,
to clarify. You can clarify until you finish clarifying, and then you take 2 minutes to prepare your structure in silence.
oh, okay, I see. So
Yeah.
you can take more time if you have more
Yes,
questions.
yes. 3 to 7 questions is kind of the ballpark of like most cases. Less than 3, if you look at your
Okay,
problem and you look like, oh, I don't have any questions, or I just have one question, maybe you are forgetting to confirm some things. Maybe you should confirm the business model. Did you understand correctly? Not every supermarket is like your supermarket. Not every gym is exactly like your gym, and so on, right? So maybe you want to confirm a little bit more. So 3 is kind of the minimum question number, and 7, more than 7, 8, 9, 10, potentially you're over asking. Not always, but potentially you're going too much into detail, and you might annoy an impatient interviewer. Okay, so
okay,
ballpark 3 to 7, and follow-up questions if you didn't understand exactly what they meant. This doesn't count, right? So it's just like clarify that answer. It's a follow-up. Okay, let's
okay.
continue.
And then,
Go
yeah,
ahead.
just one more thing to clarify. Like, is there a total time duration for the case interview? And I
Yes,
just want to understand, like, if
yes. Typically,
you don't
one
want to
interview
spend,
has 1
okay,
hour in total. 1
okay,
hour in total. Then you're gonna spend 10 to 15 minutes in personal fit, 25 to 35 minutes in the case, and then a final minutes for your questions to the interviewer. Okay,
thank
so a
you.
case typically 25, 35 minutes. Very good. Thank you so much for the questions. They're good questions. Let's move on to the first big pillar. Now things start to get a bit more challenging, right? Structuring a problem. Let's stop for 2 minutes, everybody, and jot down your approach to it. Even if it's your very first case, try to break things down into like what components would you investigate. 2 minutes. All right. So 2 minutes feels fast, but unfortunately, that's what you have on average to work with in a typical case interview. Do I have a volunteer who wants to present a structure? Someone wants to take a shot at it. Let's take Pooja, you're the first one. Or did you just didn't raise your hand? Or maybe Jessica. Jessica, then, please.
Hello, can you hear
Hi.
me?
Yes, perfect.
Perfect. So I would say, since you said that making hypotheses in the structure, I think we should start with this. And I would take the information I got from the beginning, and they said that the analog business model is declining, and the digital one is growing fast. And so I would change first the way they work and focus on the digital business model, to be honest, and then see what they could do with the things they're already doing, and maybe compare the market right now in Europe, because they focus on the Europe market, and then I don't know, seek for information. I don't know if it's too far for the structure, but I think this is how I would approach it.
Thank you, Jessica. Yeah, you're telling me more about the process, right? So you would first have a hypothesis that, okay, this business is more interesting, right? That's good. That's fine and fair. But I wouldn't exclude the analog business so quickly because it's 90% of our business. Maybe we can still do stuff there. Don't discard it so early, okay? That's my first thought. The second thought is, of course, you want to look at competition and do a benchmarking, but that's only one of the things you have to do, okay? Let's see here who else wants to also give a shot. How do I say that? Stij.
Yes, that's perfect. Yes.
Okay, good.
So,
Go ahead.
yes, thank you. So, as it is a profitability problem and we are talking about analog first, so I will break this into the costs involved and the revenue streams that are involved with respect to the analog business.
Mhm.
I will go through this and then I will try to look at the value chain of the whole analog devices
Mhm.
as to what all different costs are involved with respect to the end-to-end delivery of these devices.
Mm.
And similarly, I will look at the different channels of revenue that could be or that are possible that the company is dealing with. Maybe it is D2C, direct to customers, or it is maybe to retail, or it is directly to some certain different businesses. It is B2B. So like that, I will start with it. And then with respect to value chain, again, that is one where I raise my hand because one thing that I always get stuck at is that we always, so right, if I'm giving an interview for a strategy position in a pharma company, I can definitely analyze what kind of a market. I can analyze that what could be the
Mhm.
value chain of it. But there are many times that you don't exactly know the value chain
Yeah.
of that specific business. At
Yeah.
that point of time, I really get stuck. So
That's
right now also,
yeah. So you have experience in pharma.
yes, I have experience. I don't have experience in pharma, but
Okay.
I have given 5-6 cases. So out of that, 1-2 were in pharma. So I knew.
Okay.
I was
Okay.
giving it for a pharma company. That is why I knew.
Okay. Okay. Great. No, Kishit, that's the thing, right? So over time, when you do many cases in many industries, you start getting the business sense and understanding the value chain of different companies.
Understand. Yeah.
Good.
So
Okay. So I like this breakdown. Thank you, Kshitj.
Yeah.
I like revenues and costs. I will propose something later on, but I want one more example. Do I have anyone? James, I think you wanted to also give a shot.
Oh,
Please.
yeah, sure. So I think, yep. What I have is I'll look at two things. First of all, profitability, and second, I'll look at segments. For profitability, I think my hypothesis is either revenues are growing or sorry, revenues are declining or costs are growing. For revenues, I want to look at two things. One is the X-ray business and the MRI business. And specifically for these businesses, I want to understand what price they're selling their machines at and how much quantity. So I want to understand if it's a pricing concern or it's a quantity sort of decline that's impacting revenue. On the cost side of things, I want to understand both their fixed and variable costs. Fixed costs, there's their plant, there's the assets, there could be depreciation in play. Variable costs, I would like to look at labor, materials, especially for the X-rays. They also mentioned the direct sales force, so I would also want to look at sales and marketing costs, as well as research and development. Once I'm done evaluating profitability, I also want to look at the key segments that they sell to. I think top of my mind, there'll be hospitals and clinics, and just want to understand the sales performances of these segments.
Okay.
I think that's what I have so far.
Very clear, very clear.
Yeah.
Thank you, James. Thank you. It was
Most
worth
welcome.
volunteering. Great. Okay,
Thank
you, folks. Thank you, everybody, for the shot at it. Great. I love it. I love the energy. I love the courage to come step forward, right? That's the spirit. Now, let me give you some theory behind structuring because it's a big topic. And we, of course, in Highbridge, we develop certain tools to help you structure better, right? There are three tools. Today, I'm going to mostly talk about the first one, the three basic formats, okay? And this is the very first question you have to ask yourself. Which structure format should I use, okay? It depends, right? Looks complex, but I'll walk you through, right? If there is some financial issue, right? A profit change, revenue change, like something is changing in the numbers, financially, then you move on to, do we know the financial origin of the issue? Do we know what's causing that, right? What is the quantitative change? What is causing our profits to go down? Is it like the price of product A? Is it the cost M, or what? If we don't know, we have to isolate. We have to find the number that is responsible. And this is what we do with a quantitative structure. Typically a profitability tree, but it can also be an ROI tree. There are other quantitative trees. For instance, profitability has dropped in the last 5 years. How can we reverse that? Or our ROI is lower than expected. What to do? Okay, that's where you focus on the profitability. Profitability trees are very versatile, and they can help you in many, many ways. For instance, it can help you, as we said, isolate issues, right, quantitatively. It can also help you estimate things. So if I ask you, what is the profit of a McDonald's store? So you can use a profitability tree as well. And it can help you brainstorm ideas. So if I ask you, like, our client is let's say, a candy factory, how can we improve profitability? Same thing, right? Either they have a problem, or they want to improve it, or they want to estimate it. Profitability trees. And I'll give you a profitability tree that is essentially great, right? It's more than what you typically see out there, revenues and costs. I'm not saying that revenues and costs never work, but I'm going to give you a profitability tree that blows your interviewers' minds, right? And that's this one here. First, I break things down into total contribution margin and fixed expenses, right? Because, folks, business people do not think in terms of revenues and costs. If you ask a CEO, a consultant, a founder, an investor, a venture capitalist, they don't think about, these are the revenues, these are the costs. They don't use those, like, this simplification like that. They think in terms of the P&L, right? In Britain, or the income statement in America. And the P&L, it starts with the revenues, then it has your variable costs, right? Often called the cost of goods sold, or COGS, right? And this equals your gross profit, also called total contribution margin. And this is the amount of money you take home after you pay for your variable costs. So if I produce this can of Coca-Cola, it sells for $2, and it cost me 50 cents to make it, I take home $1.5. That's your total contribution margin, or unit contribution margin, okay? Then I multiply this by my volume, and then I have my total contribution margin, okay? This is how they think. What am I selling? What is the profit per unit? How many units I can sell? And then you have to pay your fixed bills at the end of the month, right? Your fixed costs or fixed expenses, also called SG&A. Oops, SG&A. I'm writing with my mouse. Forgive me for the bad handwriting. Okay, and that's the bills, the recurring bills. And after that, you have your taxes, your depreciation, and everything else. But in the end of the day, that's enough for consulting cases, like you get to the profits. Okay, that's what this tree does for you. It breaks down the amount of money that is coming in after you pay your variable costs minus your fixed expenses, and that's the residue is your profits. Okay, Flavio, why should I use that instead of revenues and costs? Because it helps you have clarity. It shows business sense. It helps you manipulate this tree later on much easier if you have numbers to do it. Okay, here I'm segmenting. And here I'm segmenting again, machines and consumables. Remember, I told you that, right? Is this a segmentation? This is a sub-segmentation. And here is when I get to the volume and the unit contribution margin that I talked about, right? Unit contribution margin is your price minus your unit variable cost, which are typically those things here. And of course, your revenue is still in this tree, right? So if you multiply units sold per price, you have your revenue. So in this particular tree, if I give you, like, suppose that now you spend 10 cents less labor because of AI, you can spend 10 cents of labor less per unit. What does it have? What happens to your profits? Well, it's easy because you just have to multiply. So this is a cost, it's going down. If this is going down by 10 cents, this is going up by 10 cents, multiplied by units sold, then I have the profits coming straight into my contribution margin and straight into the profits, okay? It helps you manipulate, it helps you stay aligned with the P&L. That's how we teach you at Highbridge. A lot of interviewers, they say, wow, it's the first time someone comes to me and really explains to me how things are actually done, okay? And there's one plus in this tree here, which you see here. Until here, we're talking about quantitative changes, right? This is all quantitative, including fixed expenses. But here, your revenue is a function of a few dynamics in the market, right? Your revenue depends on your customer segments and what we call CBC, the customer buying criteria. What do they value? It depends on what your competitors are offering and how good they are, and what your company is offering, how good it is. We are already going into the qualitative analysis, okay? So it's a purely profitability tree, it stops here, okay? You don't look at those things. But we learned at Highbridge, a lot of interviewers, they really like to see that you are thinking about the market as well, right? And that's a good thing to add to your structures. Okay, I know it's a lot of content. Of course, in the bootcamp, we go through it and slower, and also we show different examples. But let me open up for questions. Please raise your hand if you have a question or use the chat. We have 70 minutes to go. No questions? Don't be shy.
Hi, Flavio. I have a question.
Yes, perfect.
So I understand that the structure helps us determine what could be the causes of the drop in profitability. But when you were reading out the prompt, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought you said, and how can we improve this as part of the question?
Good.
So would you therefore include a bucket
Yeah.
for revenue and cost strategies as well?
Good question, Flavia. Thank you for that. Not really, because even though the question was double, as you said, what is happening, how to fix it, you will fix it over the course of the case together with the interviewer, right? I do recommend, if you don't have an isolated problem yet, that you just do one thing at a time and just focus there. Because imagine you find out that the problem is that, for instance, our sales commission is too high, right? Or is increasing. So it's a bit useless for you to come up with a lot of ideas on many different buckets before we isolate the problem that is in here, right? You first try to fix what is the problem, and later on you can look at other opportunities to improve. Like, you can always improve a lot of things in a business, but usually you diagnose, you try to solve that main thing, and you see if it hits your goal. If it hits your goal, move on to the next project. Okay, so you don't try to do too much with your structure. We teach you at Highbridge, like, if you don't have clarity on the diagnosis, diagnose.
Understood.
Okay.
Thank you.
No problem.
Quick question again is, Flavio, how would you go about with hypothesis over here?
Very good question, Sangeet. I would say in the end of your structure, when you present everything, you can come up with a couple of favorite hypotheses that you would like to explore first, that you think is the most, let's say, promising avenues to explore, right? You can say, for instance, like Jessica said in the beginning, I believe the analog business is going down. Therefore, I would like to take a look at, let's say, the volumes, sales volume, to see if they are going down. And you can mention that as a, let's say, your next steps. These are my hypotheses. This is what I would investigate. Depending on the interview type that you are in, the interviewer will give you the data and let you explore the hypothesis and test it. Or they will just move on to the next question. They'll say like, yeah, interesting, but yeah, I have another question for you. And they will guide you. That's the interviewer led. Okay, that's why it's important to be aware of those differences.
Just to follow up again for that, sorry about that, is at this point you've presented and your hypothesis, and like, if it is a candidate led, do you ask for, okay, should we explore the revenue side or the the market dynamics first, or like do you want me to explore the cost side of things first? Like how would you go about it now?
You should decide yourself based on the information and the prompt. You should choose one avenue first, right? What is your favorite one to start with, without your interviewers, let's say, like without asking your interviewer. And yeah, just you have to show confidence that you know where you want to start. Even if it's the wrong branch, it's not a problem because you're being methodical and using hypotheses. Okay. Hypotheses are always welcome in any type of cases. So answering Bhavya here in the chat. But the difference is, I don't like, look, if you're listening to Victor Chang or reading Case Interview Secrets, or even worse, Case in Point, stop it. Stop it. These methods, they do more damage than good. Okay. Some people will tell you to listen to case interviews on your on your phone, on your earphones, like 5-10 times to memorize how it's done, or to that's a very bad approach. Okay, don't try that. Don't spend time doing that. These books are very old, methods are very old, they don't work. And one of the things that they say is like, start with a hypothesis first, like create a hypothesis and then structure it from there. Like, for instance, I believe that analog business is going down. To test this hypothesis, and then you structure it. Don't do that. It's super complex. It's not very useful, and you will likely make a mistake, right? You just need to break down the issue, and then in the end, you can hypothesize of what may be happening here and there, okay? And that's the best approach. Very important. Should we ask about the market first before looking into the details about the product? Not necessarily. I wouldn't necessarily ask, because this profitability tree starts from, so it's an internal analysis. I really don't like the frameworks that people say internal and external, because the external, everything external impacts the internal. So it's not messy, right? So it's better to do a profitability tree, and then you look, you know that you are being messy completely, and then what is affecting different numbers, then that's the external effort or external areas. Okay, but that's it. Let's continue because of time. Oh, here I have to make an invitation. If we're not connected yet, feel free to send me an invitation request. It would be lovely to connect on LinkedIn. Just Google Flavio Soriano, you're going to find it there in the search bar. And I share some material sometimes with my followers. Now, let's move on to a graphs and math question, because I want you to try this one out. So the analog business sells 3 types of products. The team suspects that there has been a worrying price decline. So this is a hypothesis, right, in one of these categories. Which category would you investigate first? Tell me in the chat after looking. Which one would you take a deeper look first? Consumables, as they are the largest. Any other opinions? Come on, we are 80 people here. Like, I have only 2. Services, okay. Disagreement is not a bad thing. Service, consumables. Why services if you said services? Consumables, nobody going for machines and equipment. Services, highest unit sold, less revenue generated. Consumables are dependent on machines sold as well. Okay, good. Thank you for explaining. So this one is very, very clear. Right? For a consultant, you go for consumables, because most of the time, if there's no other information, you always go for the largest one. Never start with the smallest one, because it can grow more, or just to take it out of the way. Like, if we don't know the growth rates, if we don't know anything else, just go for the biggest, because in the biggest, if you have a 1% impact, it's a lot more money for you and for your client than in the smallest or in the smaller ones. Okay, so please make sure that you have this in check. Business sense, you prioritize the biggest ones first. Now, math question for you. What was the average price decline over 10 years in consumables? Again, what was the average price decline over 10 years in consumables? I'll give you 2 information pieces. First, the revenue in consumables has grown 25% in total in the last 10 years. So the revenue in consumables has grown 25% in the last decade. And two, volume in consumables has grown 66% in the same period. Okay, consumables the volume has grown 66% in the same period. Now, you should ask yourself, like, do I know everything I need to answer this question? Well, there are also clarifying questions for math questions. This is not a skill that you only use in the beginning. Okay, so first you do define any words that you didn't understand. What do you mean by that exactly? What are consumables? Can I just understand? Yes, okay, this is the X-ray plate and the liquids that you need there. Okay. And then you also clarify what is the final unit expected, because maybe I'm looking for a percentage decline, maybe I'm looking for an absolute decline or something different, right? Never assume that the interviewer wants a specific unit without confirming it. I always say, as a pilot, you would never take off with your plane and in the middle of the flight, figure out where you will land and check out with the ground people like, oh, can I land there? But where exactly do you want me to land, right? So you only take off in math when you know the destination, you know the final unit, you clarified exactly. It's a percentage, it's absolute, it's the difference, is the marginal, or the delta. So that's it, okay? I see some people already doing this math. Anybody agrees with James or disagrees? 25% drop. That, by the way, it would be my answer, right? I want the percentage drop. Since there's no, let's say, objection, let's take this answer as correct, right? And I agree, James. So here the math is revenue. The formula of revenues is volume versus price. Okay, this should be inside you already. It would be like an intuition. And we said revenues are up by 25%, volumes by 66. Okay, and if I play around with fractions, which are very much our friends in case interview, so if you have to brush up on math, we do have that in the bootcamp as well, algebra classes and arithmetics, but it's important anyway, right? To go back to your math skills at the time when you finish high school, at least, right? And then if you move things around, you find out that 3/4 of the price is the new price, which is 25% decline, okay? Now, you could do a much longer calculation, right? You can always find other paths to the answer. Here would be like a super step-by-step approach, okay? I'll not go through it. I don't want to, we don't have time, first of all. But in the end of the day, you can also put some numbers on things, right? And then find out later on exactly what is the price decline, right? What is the price before and after? If the interviewer asks you what was exactly the price before and after, then you might want to do this whole calculation, okay? Let's just take questions in the end. If you have any, please drop it in the chat. What areas? So now the brainstorming skill. We did listening, recap, clarifying, structuring, math. Now let's do the brainstorming. This could be a question. What areas would you want to investigate to determine the causes of this price decline in consumables of the order of 25%? Tell me in the chat. Let's brainstorm together. What areas would you like to investigate to find out why this price has dropped by 1/4? Any ideas? Just share in the chat, just everything that comes to mind. It's a brainstorming. In the brainstorm, you should not be afraid of your ideas, because if you're thinking too much, you're overthinking. You will not be able to have enough ideas for a case interview. Market segmentation, competitiveness of the market. Yeah, you can see like, yeah, substitutes, competitors, new entrants, areas to investigate, competitive landscape, skills, economies of scale, any changes in the available raw materials. Would that decrease the price? Maybe, right? If there's more raw materials. So look, maybe you study economics, but you have to have a little bit of intuition about economics too. Prices are a function of supply and demand. So you can organize your ideas around those areas. So the demand has decreased or the supply has increased. Those things cause a price decline. There's too much things in the market, gets cheaper. There's less demand overall, like prices go down to kind of try to sell to the less demand that there is. Okay, so essentially know about prices as a function of supply and demand to organize your ideas. Then you can say a lot of things. Maybe there are more entrants, like you said. Maybe people launch new products, competitors launch more products. Maybe there's a cheaper technology, right, to produce it, okay, which increases the supply because it's cheaper, increases the supply, decreases the price, and so on, okay? So what is the bar for a brainstorming, Flavio? Well, at least 8 ideas in 60 seconds, okay, normally. Don't overthink it, as I said. Just have ideas and show that you can think very creatively about a lot of things. And then there's the synthesis. We don't have time to go through it today because the case, like I focused on the first skills with you. But here is where you provide a recommendation to the client and you give essentially what you suggest them to do. There's a formula for that. It's a recipe. It's also about synthesizing well, because you cannot speak for very long. It's just 1 minute. And you deliver what should they do, why, what are the risks and next steps, okay?